Hey guys, it's Ettore. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to ask you something. What's your story? We all have one, and sometimes it takes the right space and a little guidance to bring that story to life. That's why I created the Ink and Authenticity Men's Creative Writing Workshop. It's a unique space for men to explore their identities, reflect on personal experiences, and use writing as a tool for self-discovery. Whether you're an experienced writer or have never written a word, this workshop is for you. Join me and other like-minded men on this journey. Visit authenticityroad.online/workshop to learn more. Thanks. And now on to today's episode. What if the path to your most authentic self led along unexpected alleyways and around hidden corners? What if embracing fear, risk, and raw vulnerability was the way to truly live? Today, we're diving into a story that shatters the comfort of the ordinary. Our anonymous guest, known only as Adam, is a man who has built his life on locating the edges, pushing past fear to uncover what lies beneath. His journey, as recounted in his memoir, Seek the Risk, is one of diving into the depths of both the ocean and the human psyche, of leaping from cliffs and into the unknown territory of his own heart. Adam's story isn't just about extreme sports or unconventional relationships. It's about confronting the lies we tell ourselves, tearing down the walls that keep us safe but stagnant, and welcoming the discomfort that leads to true growth. Adam has lived a life that defies the ordinary in pursuit of something more valuable: authenticity. In this episode, we'll explore what it means to live a life where the risk is not just physical, but emotional and existential. Adam's experiences will challenge you to question how far you're willing to go to discover your true self. Are you ready to take the leap? Then let's get on the road. Welcome to the Authenticity Road podcast.
We started this podcast to share our stories and hear from others about their adventures in men's work.
Join us on the journey to our fully authentic selves, emotional healing, and the meaning of modern masculinity.
Here on Authenticity Road.
Hello, and welcome to the Authenticity Road podcast. I am Ettore, and this week on the show, I am pleased to welcome our guest. He is a writer and blogger who works anonymously, and so we shall simply call him Adam. Adam is an adventurer and a risk taker, deeply shaped by his upbringing in New York City during the turbulent 1980s. Raised by parents who were passionate about the arts and culture of the city, Adam developed a love for exploration and pushing boundaries. This drive led him to pursue extreme sports like rock climbing, skydiving, and base jumping, where he constantly tested his limits and sought new challenges. Beyond his physical pursuits, Adam is a thinker and a seeker, always exploring the edges of human experience. His career has been diverse as his passions, with ventures ranging from Wall Street to entrepreneurship. Through it all, Adam has remained committed to living authentically, embracing both the risks and rewards that come with a life lived on the edge. Known for his candidness and introspection, Adam's philosophy centers on experience hunting, the idea of seeking out meaningful, transformative experiences rather than simply chasing success or validation. He encourages others to step out of their comfort zones, confront their fears, and embrace life's uncertainties with courage and curiosity. Adam's journey is a testament to the power of living boldly and fully, always in search of the next adventure. His memoir, Seek the Risk, delves into his journey into non-monogamy, exploring love, sex, and identity through unconventional relationships. Adam's story is one of self-discovery, where he confronts his fears, embraces his desires, and challenges societal norms. Adam remains a relentless experience hunter, always looking for new opportunities to grow. His writing is brutally honest and introspective, sharing his journey to live authentically and encouraging others to do the same. He invites us to question our own lives, explore beyond the conventional, and find deeper meaning in every experience. Adam, thank you for being here today. Is there anything that I missed or misspoke or anything else that you want folks to know about you before we get started today?
The only thing I would add is, first of all, that was a great introduction. Thank you. The only thing I would add is I would say from Wall Street to dumpster diving and living out of my truck. Those seems like more of a opposite ends than the Wall Street to entrepreneurship. But
yeah, we were going to get to the dumpster driving and living out of your truck at some point, because I actually have that page pulled up on my screen so that we can refer to it later, because that is, so in full disclosure, I have to confess that I've only read the excerpts of the book that you pointed out. But what I have read has left me wanting to read it all. I can't wait to dive in. The pieces that I read were so frank and unflinching, and explicit without being salacious, and moving without being maudlin. And so I'm really looking forward to diving in and reading the whole thing. But I did want to get to that point about, sort of the grand disparity of experiences that you've lived. So what brought you to write this memoir?
Gosh, it was an accident. At least I tell myself it was an accident, but in reality, it fits in perfectly with a lot of things I've done in my life. It was actually the hardest thing I've ever done, is writing this. And in terms of authenticity, writing it was the ultimate example of authenticity for me, because when I went through this experience with this woman named Jane in the book, it was very public. And a lot of people, she's something of a minor celebrity. So a lot of people were witnessing what I was witnessing the relationship. And what they saw was very different than what was actually happening internally. And people had an idea of what I was like in the relationship and my strengths were, and they would ask me about it. And I was like, well, absolutely no, that's not what's going on in my head. So writing it was sort of like, okay, let's see if I can do this. It happened during the pandemic when I was doing nothing. So I just thought I'd try it. I'd always journaled. And so, yeah, I just thought, let me see if I can accurately describe what I was truly going through and sort of step down off the pedestal a lot of people in the non-monogamy world had somewhat put me, I wouldn't say, put me on a gigantic pedestal, but people saw me doing this really well. And in fact, it was unbelievably difficult and hard. And I learned so much about myself. And so I guess that's why I wrote it. It just seemed like another challenge to be that open with people and let the world into how I was thinking and all my failings.
Yeah. And, as I said in my opening, it's brutally honest. And that kind of honesty, I really have to honor you for that, because, I know you've jumped out of planes thousands of times, but there is something very frightening about revealing such intimate pieces of yourself in this very public way. And so kudos to you for finding the intestinal fortitude to just rip your chest open and pour it all out for us to read. Really great work.
Thank you.
What appealed to me about having you on the show is that, we talk on this show, it's called Authenticity Road, because we talk about how people find their authentic selves and the value in finding your authentic self. And we generally do it through the frame of men's work. What I liked about your story was this was how one man found his authenticity, how one man found out and learned so much about himself just by opening up and exploring. And so when we first met, or when we first talked, you said something like, well, this is pretty spicy. Are you sure this is right for your show? And I said, yeah, this is definitely right for the show, because this is exactly what I want people to get out of this, right? I want people to just sort of completely fearlessly dive in and go, this is me, fucking warts and all. Take me and see me. And that's what you did. and I realize I'm pontificating, so I'll let you speak.
Well,
since you're the guest.
I'll back you up a second there. When you said you fearlessly dove in, and I absolutely did not fearlessly dive in. I dove in with lots of fear. And that's something I talk about a lot in the book, is the fact that fear is very real, especially in all the extreme sports I did in my 20s and early 30s. And it wasn't, I mean, the book follows my journey through the whole relationship, but initially the relationship destroyed me. And that's because I wasn't admitting the fear that I had. And when I stepped back and started, and the book bounces between my experiences in the extreme sports world and in the extreme non-monogamy world. And it wasn't until I started making the connection that, I need to start thinking about this like I think about everything in my life, that the fear is real. You need to accept the fear, and then you have to try and understand the fear. Is the fear valid, or is the fear holding you back, or is the fear based on preconceived narratives in your head about yourself? And that's, so I never dove in anything fearlessly. I mean, all my climbing, I have lots of fear, skydiving, base jumping, the snowboarding stuff, everything has lots of fear. So I just, managing fear and not letting it control you is the key to how I've lived my life.
I love that. And growing up in New York City when you did, managing fear was a daily daily activity, right?
It really was, yeah.
I want to go back though to the relationship for a second. So, because I didn't get to this part of the book. Did you seek out a non-monogamous relationship, or is it that you were attracted to Jane and sort of fell into the world of non-monogamy?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. We all tell stories about ourselves of who we are, and I had this image of myself by the time I met Jane. It was my mid-30s when I met her. I had been doing extreme sports. I had already started working on, I'd moved into the professional world. I had an idea of myself as this big, strong, tough guy who could handle whatever the world threw at me. I'd had fun relationships where there was some flexibility in the relationship. Occasionally we'd have a threesome or something, and I thought I was so badass, man. I'm living life on the wild side. But that was all private. Nobody knew about it but my partners and I. Then I met Jane, and sex aside, the person that she was incredibly attractive to me. Her intelligence and her worldliness and
speaking 5 languages and
I mean, it's just like the full package. And so as we got to know each other, she was like, look, if you want to be with me, this is the only way I do relationships. I only do non-monogamy, and it's public, and you're just gonna, if you want to be with me, you're gonna have to accept that. So she presented me with it, and true. I was totally terrified of it. It seemed way out of my comfort zone. And my MO in life has been, if something makes me really uncomfortable, there might be something I can learn about myself in doing it. And so I said, okay, let's try this. I describe her in the book as a female sexuality empowerment activist. And mind you, this was 2006. So this is well before, society was sort of starting to accept this kind of thing. So it was absolutely terrifying. And the journey forced me to start looking at a lot of different things about society and things about myself that I didn't even know existed. It was a really raw knife, her level of non-monogamy and how public it was.
Yeah. And just to step back for a second, if in fact society has come to terms with it, you said, that it was before society had really come to accept it. And I'm not sure that it's even, fully accepted yet in certain circles, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah.
But, I think we still got a long way to go, for people to stay the hell out of our bedrooms.
Right.
As a queer identified man, I face this every day, You don't get to tell me who and how I love. And so, I feel kindred with you in that. On a side note, so now that, are you and Jane still together?
Well, we're not. No, the relationship lasted about 10 years.
Okay.
We're not together. We're still the best of friends. And she helped remarkably with the book, actually.
Okay.
And she thought it was she thought it was wonderful to write. She's a psychologist. So, she was.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, it's Ator again. Sorry to interrupt the show, but I want to tell you about something I'm really excited about. If you've been listening for a while, you know how important it is to take time for self-reflection and growth. That's exactly why I've created the Ink and Authenticity Men's Creative Writing Workshop. This is a 6-session online workshop designed specifically for men. Whether you're looking to explore your identity, challenge societal expectations, or simply find a creative outlet to process your life, this workshop gives you the space to do that. It's not about being a professional writer. It's about telling your story, digging deep, and connecting with others on the same journey. Each session is filled with prompts and discussions that will help you understand yourself better, all in a supportive and open environment. So if you want a way to write, reflect, and share, join me for Ink and Authenticity. Just visit authenticityroad.online/workshop to learn more and register. Now, let's get back to the show. But now that you're, on your own, so to speak, or out of that relationship, is a non-monogamous approach to love. Did you discover that is who you essentially are, that you really are, and that's what you want going forward? Or was it just that was an anomaly from that relationship?
I explored what she wanted to have because I really wanted to be with her. But in the end, I decided that flavor of relationship isn't for me.
Okay.
And this is sort of the key part of the book, is that what I knew about myself is that if I'm going to say no to the relationship, let's make sure I was saying no for the right reasons. Not because I was scared, not because I was threatened by public judgment. Let's make sure if I say no, it's because I decided that's just not who I am or how I want to be in a relationship. So now, am I totally monogamous? No. If you listen to Dan Savage, there's this talk of monogamish, which is probably more where I am. I want a partner, one relationship, and every now and then, who knows, right? But
yeah.
What I did with her was absolutely extreme, and I don't want to do that again. But it was fun.
I mean, I guess what I want to hear here, or what I want to say here, is hearing that is before you say no to something, you want to know exactly what it is that you're saying no to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things I like that you sort of hinted at earlier is something that we talk about a lot in the world of men's work, and that is getting comfortable with discomfort. And you said that when something feels like it might be uncomfortable for you, that you kind of walk toward it because you might learn something about yourself. And that's sort of what we teach in the work that I do. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, in listening to some of your previous episodes, I do notice you focus on masculinity and men's themes a lot. And I'd say there's a tremendous of that in the book. I was grappling with my own masculinity throughout the entire narrative because this relationship totally smashed what I had in my head about, how I presented to the world as a man. But it's funny you said the uncomfortable. I don't know if you read that line in the book, but I said I've made a point in my life to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
I did not see that, but yeah.
So it's funny when you said that. I was like, oh, did you read that? But this idea of discomfort. Shit. I'm sorry. What was the question? You can erase over this, right?
I can, but I'm not sure I want to.
Shit, I totally forgot what the question was.
It was just really, talking a little bit more about your experience with getting comfortable with discomfort.
Right. I can't remember when I first came to that realization, but it was somewhere in my early 20s early 20s that I recognized that if I always tried to stay in my comfort zone, I was never going to learn anything. The very first time that ever happened was trying out for my the hockey team at school in college. I think when I was totally embarrassed. The first time I went out, I failed miserably, and then I decided to come back the next year and trade. But it was so embarrassing the first time I tried out that I really didn't want to. It was totally uncomfortable. But I was like, hey, if I want to grow, if I want to seek if I want to have great experiences, I'm going to have to learn how to get past discomfort. So I want to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And ever since then, I've just made it a point to always seek out the discomfort, which I know sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but it provides a lifetime of experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have if you always try and stay in your comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we try and teach men to get comfortable with discomfort. And by the way, for listeners, that hockey experience, you have a terrific blog post about that hockey experience. That's really enlightening. I want to talk for a minute about masculinity. Since you opened that door, let's walk through it. This non-monogamous relationship challenged your notions of your masculinity. And I'm curious, what were your notions about who you were as a man and around masculinity? How did it challenge you, and where did you end up?
Okay. That's
a long question.
Yeah. I also, just before I get into that, I also want to say this relationship challenged my ideas of femininity as well. I mean, who Jane was smashed my ideas of femininity as well as my ideas of masculinity. One of the first things, so I guess I'll step back to the extreme sports. I'm a young man in my 20s, full of bravado, young, dumb, and as they say.
Right.
And I was trying to prove myself to the world. I enjoyed the extreme sports I was doing, but there was a significant amount of second-party validation that I was going for in my climbing, in my base jumping, in my extreme snowboarding. I was doing things so I could tell people I did them, not necessarily just because I wanted to do them. And I had this real epiphany, which I describe in the book, Won't Go Into Now, where I sort of understood that. And I sort of switched and was like, okay, now as I hit 30 or so, I was like, wait a second, I'm going to start living more authentically. I'm going to start doing things. I'm going to start doing hard things because I want to do them, not because I want to tell people I want to do them. So that was a real growth point for me. But what I hadn't realized is I was still existing in that idea of second party validation with my masculinity around my relationship and around my female partner. And I had an idea of who I was, and now I had an idea of who my female partner was going to be, and that was who my female partner was helping to define my masculinity in my head, and how other people saw my female partner was helping define my masculinity in my head. This was all unknown to me until I entered in this relationship with Jane. And when I first started dating Jane, she shows up unbelievable, right? This tall Eastern European, incredibly smart, gorgeous, can converse with anyone on anything.
PhD candidate.
Candidate. Everyone's like, oh my God, jackpot, right? And all of a sudden—
You're dating a supermodel. Right?
Yeah, exactly. My value went up because of the adoration that my female partner, and I was feeling very masculine and great. But then, as I describe in the book, meanwhile, there's this undercurrent going on that I know until eventually it becomes public about the non-monogamy. And there's this one moment in the book where she puts it out on Facebook that oh, I'm now in a non-monogamous relationship with Adam. I won't give my real name and everything, but and there was that moment with, oh my God, this just happened, and like overnight, her value went to zero with my entire world, and my value, like now all of a sudden, oh, I'm a little wussy man. Oh, right. his girlfriend sleeps with other men. And it was this incredible eye opener for me, about society and also about me and how much I was basing my own masculinity on all these external sources about of how the second parties saw my relationship and my partner. So it started me on this journey of really understanding, okay, what actually makes me a man? How do I define my masculinity? And in the book, I talk about this masculinity continuum. I don't know if you read that part, and I say, well, there's the bland to toxic masculinity continuum, right? And you have bland masculinity on one side, and you have toxic masculinity on the other, and neither are good. Right. But both have elements that I wanted to have. Like the bland masculinity has certain empathy and certain understanding and has certain softness that you want. And the toxic masculinity has certain strength and certain power that you want to exude. But the extreme examples are terrible. So in the book, I'm like, okay, I need to somehow blend these two to come out that elusive balance point in the middle. So the public non-monogamy forced me to confront that in a way I don't think I could have in any other way. And it started me really looking to how I behaved to the external world and how I was satisfied with my own choices and how I showed up. And so this relationship forced me to start looking at that. And I realized that the man I want to be is a man who behaves in certain ways, not how the world sees me. And I know it sounds obvious, but until it's smacking you in the face with a 2x4, it's hard to really wrap your brain around it. And that's one of the greatest gifts I got from this relationship, was how much I started sinking into myself and being the man I wanted to be, not by how everyone else defined me, because how everyone else defined me went to zero immediately after that. It was wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think you've found your spot in the continuum that feels right for you now?
I think it's an ongoing process. I would never say, oh, hey, I did it. I'm there now. I'm perfect. No, it's an ongoing.
I've arrived. Yeah.
I've arrived. I'll just say I guess there's two ideas here, right? There's the idea of where on the continuum you want to be, and then there's the idea of how do you tell yourself you're at that point, right? Are you telling yourself you're at that point because of the way other people interact with you, or are you telling yourself you're at that point because of the way you interact with other people?
Right. Yeah. And after all, that's why we call the show Authenticity Road and not Authenticity Station or Terminal or Endpoint, right? You know, we're all on the road, right? We're all kind of finding our own way. How much of that, your value as a man, goes to zero? Well, let me rephrase that. How much of that, your value of a man, increases when people meet Jane and then goes to zero when the non-monogamy becomes public, is your self-perception, and how much of that is reality? Like, how much of that was your insecurities around, oh, I'm high value now that I have this incredible woman, and I'm low value now that everyone knows that she sleeps with other men, versus what people were really thinking? Mm-hmm. How much of that was a story you told yourself? It's
a healthy mix. It's absolutely a mixture. There's no question. And I dive into that in the book about how much I'm being controlled by my own insecurities. It takes me a little while to get there. The book is basically a thought experiment told in story form. Yes, there was certainly a lot of real feedback I was getting from people. My best friend, after this post went up, he's like, "You let other guys fuck your woman? What kind of a man are you?" Right. So that was very real. I got all kinds of comments anytime I met any of my friends. They're always like, "So wait, you're in an open relationship?" It was just this, they couldn't, there was a lot of judgment. whether or not my value went to zero, there was
Right.
a tremendous amount of judgment. Then there's also the story in my head that I was telling myself, look at this great guy. Look at this wonderful, incredible trophy wife I have. And then the trophy was gone. And so there was a lot of internal narrative around that for sure. Yes, you're right to point that out. And I definitely talk about that within the book.
I don't know if you consider yourself a feminist or not, but as I heard you talk, I heard something in there that would make any feminist cringe. And that was this notion of your friend saying, I can't believe you let your woman fuck another man. As if you are in control of this other person's body, or you're in control of this other person's sexuality, which is such a toxically masculine position. I'm wondering if that occurred to you at the time, or if that's something that you came to later. Or
you're great, Ettore, because if I pronounce
if you've gotten there yet,
is it Ettore? It's Ettore or Ettore?
Ettore.
Ettore. You're spot on, because that I did respond to him, and I wrote the exact line in the book when he said, "You let your woman fuck other, or let other men fuck your woman." And my response to him was, and this is a direct quote from the book, "I don't let her fuck other men any more than I let her be female."
Ah, good. See, now I wished I'd read that so I didn't have to ask the question.
That's great. I was actually, wow, that was pretty, when I said it to him, I was like, wow, that was pretty good. It was long before I was even thinking of writing a book, but I always remembered it. And then I used it when people were talking to me about it. I used it for years.
What's funny to me about this book is that of the pieces that I've read, is that it goes for the same stuff that I'm teaching men, and the same stuff that we in the world of men's work want men to get, through this very, how can I put it? Through this guy lens, through this, men talk about sex, and sex is an important part of our lives and our identities. And in this world this circle that I travel in, we don't really talk about sex that much. And what I love about this book is that it gets to so much of what I'm trying to teach men to do, but does it in a way that is not preachy and that meets guys where they are. That's why I hope that guys who hear this will read the book, because I think it's really great. But one of the things I want to address around this is the subject of emotions, because in our work, we are trying to teach men to feel their emotions, because men are taught from a very early age, when we're boys, that we don't get to feel emotions. Girls get the full palette of emotions, but boys get two. You get to be happy or you get to be angry. And by the way, you don't get to be angry because that's dangerous. So you get to be happy or nothing at all, right? And what I'm trying to do, or what we're trying to do in this world, is to get guys and say, okay, you've been pressing this down for 30, 40, 50 years. Let's open up that door and let's let you experience the full palette of emotions and get in touch with that. And what the pieces of your book that I read that really resonated with me had exactly to do with the fact that you were able to find all these emotions that you didn't know you had and start exploring them. What can you say to that? And where you found this, like where you decided, hey, I can feel shit.
Well, I think that, in the book, I basically say that stemmed from all the extreme sports participation I did as a younger man, because, and this goes back to the fear, right?
Right.
That I was managing emotions constantly, especially there's the managing the fear. And then there's managing, when I was competing in things, there's the managing of making sure your opponent doesn't see any fear. And so there's always this narrative in my head whenever I was participating in these sports of managing the emotions and understanding them and diving deep and trying to flesh them out so I can control them better. Now, obviously, it's very different than the emotions around sex and relationships, but the process of recognizing fear and then diving into the fear was the same, just recognizing the fear. The fear was totally different. So I guess one of the things I've been hampered by my entire life is my emotions. They really try to control me. I have been noticing that ever since a very young age. And it has been an ongoing challenge since I was a kid to not let my emotions get the better of me. And I think that's just, I don't know if that's just who I mean, we all have emotions. And as men, sometimes our emotions just spike and we want to explode.
Right.
But one of the things the extreme sports taught me is when your emotions spike, you absolutely cannot let them, especially if you're free soloing or you're base jumping or you're on some crazy snowboarding adventure. So I think that it started there. And then in general, I'm just a pretty introspective guy. I don't have a better answer for you as to why. I will say this, that writing down my emotions always helped flush them out. And I've always journaled. Even from a very young age. And I think all that journaling probably prepped me for the journey I went on with Jane, because I was journaling during that and I was writing emotions down because I never wanted to be that guy who exploded and then had to go apologize. And I want to, I mean, not that I don't, sorry, that came out totally wrong. I always apologize when I should, but I don't be the guy who like smashes his TV or breaks, even though inside my head, I want to take a baseball bat and start breaking things. And that's,
right.
I think that's the Neanderthal in us that's still in there.
Right.
Though I think as the evolutionary scientists would probably say, no, we don't have Neanderthals in us. Just a very tiny bit.
Just between the two of us, there are no evolutionary scientists in the room right now.
Okay.
So just feel free to say whatever you like. Right. What I like about what you just said that really fires me up is that you got to the place organically that we try and teach men to get to. And that is, we are always trying to get guys to expand the bandwidth of their parasympathetic nervous system so that they don't react, but instead respond. That, my very favorite quote of all time, which is something that's on the homepage of my website, is from Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, who was in one of the death camps. And he said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom." That to me sums up what you just said, right? It's taking the space to say, what am I feeling? What is true for me? And how do I respond in a way that is functional and it gets me what I need? So in the case of a relationship, it helps me, not pick up the TV and smash it when somebody pisses me off. In extreme sport, it helps me manage how my competitor sees me, right? So you got to this place organically through what you were doing that like we in a very structured way try and teach. So I love that you got to this same place. It's just so cool to me. There's no question there. I don't have a question for you around this.
Right, no, but I'll tell you this. When I started, so I go through this relationship with Jane. People had a lot of ideas of how I was in the relationship and they wanted advice and such and how I did it so elegantly. And I was like, it really wasn't that elegant. I was a mess inside. So when I started writing the book, at first I thought, well, let me just tell people how I managed to do it. And the first version of the book was called Chill the Fuck Out. Because that that's been my mantra in extreme sports. When I start getting fear, hey, chill the fuck out. You're doing fine. Chill the fuck out. And it was this idea of don't react, just chill the fuck out, think about it, take your time. As I started writing it, I was like, I'm really leaving out a lot of the emotional stuff. So I said, well, let me start adding the emotional stuff. And then once I started going down that road, I realized, oh, that's actually where the story was the emotional journey, not the how I managed the bits and pieces of the non-monogamy. The story was in the emotional responses and the journey that those went on. So, yeah, absolutely. This idea of that pause, that in between, and it's funny throughout the book I talk about the pause, whereas in between potential energy and kinetic energy of whatever you're doing. When it's just an idea versus an action. And that pause is where you can sink in and either enjoy it or stop it, right? Sometimes the pause is about enjoying what's about to happen. And sometimes the pause is, hold on, let me slow down. Let me just chill the fuck out and derail this for a moment and decide how I really want to react. And so yes to everything you just said. And I said that to my friends. If there's one thing to get through non-monogamy, it's just chill the fuck out. Like, just chill.
And I don't know if you talk about this in the book, but what I'm also hearing is, because one of the things I'm big on is trying to move into a state of allowing what is to be what is, and not to try and manage outcomes and not to get attached to outcomes. And it sounds to me like being in a relationship with Jane is an exercise in allowing and not getting attached to outcomes.
Absolutely. And I will say that's the same thing in climbing. Not getting attached to outcomes is absolutely critical, because if you get attached to outcomes, it can kill you. And if the same thing with the relationship with Jane, it was about the seek the risk, not the reward, right? Seek the experience, not the trophy, right? We always called that trophy bagging versus experience hunting. If you're attached to the trophy, then you're missing the point. I mean, sure, the trophy is why you want to achieve your goal. Right. But if you don't accept all the risks that come with it and all the inherent hazards and objects that are in your way, it's you're going to be miserable. So. So yeah, you need to understand that, yes, the end, I'm trying to get to a certain end, but the journey, they say the journey is all the fun, and it really is. And that's where the title comes from. It's seek the risk, but the full wording of it is seek the risk, not the reward. And make sure your motivations for what you're doing are authentic. And I say that in the book, it's understanding your motivations. Are your motivations authentic? Or are you going for the trophy? Or are you going for the validation? And that is something I battled a lot with as a younger man. And I still do. I'm human. I fail. I fall down. And making sure I just always what's really my motivation here? Am I seeking the risk or am I seeking the reward?
Yeah. I want to read a portion of your book. I'll read this out loud, and I apologize if, as I do this, I get any of the intonations wrong. It's just that this portion of the book just knocks me out. And it's one of the pieces that you said to read, that when you pointed out the excerpts that were going to be good for today. I've worked on Wall Street because I wanted to make a lot of money, and then left it because it kind of sucked and was filled with soulless individuals. I lived out of my truck for a couple of years and dumpster dived for food at times. I've won a bronze medal in an extreme sport at the national level, renovated several houses with my own hands, and traveled to every state in the union. I've had chlamydia and crabs, but not at the same time, jumped out of airplanes thousands of times, and co-authored with Jane a lengthy article published in Cosmopolitan about what happens at a high-end New York City sex party under the byline Anonymous. I've said things I wish I hadn't and behaved in ways I wished I hadn't. I've tried to make it as a photographer and failed. Tried to make it as a writer and failed, obviously. Tried to play a musical instrument with some level of proficiency and failed. I surfed waves that terrified me, taught college-level physics, played in dad-bod sports leagues after miserably failing to become a pro athlete, read a lot of books, dated women 25 years older and 25 years younger than I was, been swept off a mountain in an avalanche, worked as a biomedical research engineer, done copious amounts of drugs, and made deep, life-enhancing, lasting connections with friends that have stood the test of time, which is the achievement I'm most proud of. Experience hunting has drawn me to free solo, no ropes, rock climbing, extreme snowboarding, where falls have consequences, free diving, no tank, to astonishing depths, midnight skydiving while high as fuck, base jumping, bandit bike racing through downtown traffic, and entering into a relationship with Jane, a publicly non-monogamous, self-described New York City party girl. That section of the book is so bracing. It's shocking. It's illuminating. And it's also, giddy making. I couldn't help but just sort of giggle my way through it as I was reading it for the first time. Right? But that's the prize of this journey, of this seeing I did all of this shit. And really, it was about the experience. It was not about being able to say I did all these things. It was having done all these things. I am very curious, because that may in fact be the first time you've ever heard those words read by someone else. What is it like to hear those words parroted back at you that way?
Well, I can see your face as you're reading, and seeing the smile on your face while you were reading it was actually, it just made me feel really good, because I just saw how much you were enjoying it, and to see that was brilliant. To actually see your face, to hear the words. I like when you write a book, you end up reading it hundreds of times because so. The real joy in hearing you read that was seeing your face as you read it, and I felt that you actually were enjoying it, and it was landing the way I intended it. And so that was that's the first time I've ever heard anyone read my book back to me.
Okay, good.
I was just actually quite tickled inside. I was really enjoying it.
I love that that's your takeaway. Yeah. And I'm really also hoping that, having read that excerpt, rather than just hearing what I culled together to create your bio at the front of the show, but that when folks hear that excerpt, they're going to say, oh, hell yeah, I'm all in. I've got to read this.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is, that was when I wrote that piece, because I kind of wanted to just in a blast sort of give people a real sort of overview of experience hunting, and I was trying really hard not to come off as arrogant. And so based on your expression, I think maybe it landed the way I was hoping it would.
Yeah. I will say the first time I read it, not that it came off as arrogant, but my first flush was, you know what? I don't really like this guy, because first of all, he's way more accomplished than I am. So automatically I don't like him. No, but seriously, no, I don't like this guy because he's all about what he did, and he's all about trying to impress me with what he did and how he accomplished and the enormity of these accomplishments. And then you get to the part about experience hunting, that the lesson you learned that experience hunting was more important than trophy bagging. And that's when it shifted for me. And I went, geez, you know what? I guess I don't hate this guy. I guess I really like this guy. So it ultimately comes off the way you intended, but at first blush, it's like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? You know, it's like as soon as you hear the words Wall Street, you shut down, or I shut down as soon as I hear the words Wall Street.
But then I go straight to dumpster diving for my food.
Right, yeah,
so
exactly.
I was trying to do both of those. You know, I was trying to say, I've done this, but I also was living out of my truck and dumpster diving for my food. So I saw both. When I was trying to make it as a photographer in my 20s, an extreme sports photographer, I was absolutely broke. I was awful at it. And I just, I was frequently the dumpster behind the that supermarket. I can't remember the name of it, but they're a big national chain now. It was always great for dumpster diving for our food out when we were out climbing and such. So it was. So I've been on both sides of it, I guess is what I was trying to say with that.
No, I think the reason that maybe it triggered me a little at first is because I know an awful lot of guys who are into parading their toughness. You know, I'm an accountant by day, but, you know, every vacation I'm out there climbing the highest mountain or, you know, diving the deepest seas or, you know, whatever, and posting pictures and look at me doing this manly, rough thing. And there's an element of performativeness to that
100%,
annoys the fuck out of me.
And I was part of that.
Right. Yeah. And so at first as I was reading that, I'm like, well, this is performative. And then until it wasn't, until it was charming, you know. And I want to step back. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just say this one, right in the middle? And I thought you were going to end where I thought you were going to end with the friendship thing. Because when I say the thing I'm absolutely most proud of is the friendships I've developed, these long-term, lasting friendships that have become family. And I really, one of the things in my life as I understood, and I explained that journey throughout the book, is friendships are the whole point. The relationships that I build is the whole point. And I realize there's an event in the book that sort of starts crystallizing that for me. I don't want to give it away. But what you say about this performance, about this masculine, that's that toxic side of the masculinity. That's the second party validation masculinity that I have spent my life trying to get away from. And I don't know. It sounds, I think a lot of men, certainly young men, have that. And I've tried to grow out of it. I'm still trying to grow out of it. Because that's where what we were talking about earlier, you know, what's the real masculinity? How do you define your own masculinity in a way that's really authentic and not from the second party? So yes, to you know what you were describing about the tech bro or the guy who's always posting pictures for validation.
The finance bro bro. And I don't want you to get the idea that I was underselling or underappreciating this notion of creating lasting friendships and that being the thing you're most proud of. That struck a deep chord with me as well. And also was part of the shift of, okay, this guy's not a raging asshole, right? Because he acknowledges that the friendships are the most important part. And because friendships are really important to me too. Creating lasting relationships. And I didn't have a wide range of lasting male relationships. You know, I had one friend who was my friend since I was 5 years old or 6 years old. And we've had our ups and downs, but always been close, always been sort of brotherly. But he was it. He was my one male friend. It wasn't until these last sort of 4 or 5 years that I started doing my personal work and delving into experiencing my emotions and wearing my vulnerability more openly and all of that I began to create these friendships that I know will last me for the rest of my life. And we have an equation that we teach that says vulnerability times time equals connection. So the more vulnerable you are over the longer period of time, the deeper your connection with that person will be. And one of the things that I acknowledge about your work is that it's very vulnerable. you don't try and hide these softer, more delicate, dangerous pieces of yourself. You show it. And that vulnerability is the key to, I'm going to say, I assume that kind of vulnerability is the key to why you're able to make these lasting relationships.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know but the way you were explaining it made sense about the vulnerability. I've always called it, how I've always referred to it as depth of shared experience. And if I have enough shared experience with someone, eventually they're going to see my worst side. And it's in that, it's in that time, vulnerability over time. And I just called it depth of experience, which is over time, you start seeing more and more of who a person really is. Because we can all show up and I can present my face and I can give you my best side and give you the best part of me. But if you know me for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5, you're going to start seeing me at my most vulnerable, at my worst, at my best, and you get a much deeper picture of who a person is, and is this the kind of person you want in your life? And I've had friends for, some of my best friends I've had for close to 50 years at this point. I'm 55. My first grade pals, and I talk about this in the book, it's a group of us that are still super tight. I have friends for 20 years, 30 years. My climbing partner, who I reference a lot in the book, we met in my mid-20s, and we just created a bond through our climbing, through our skydiving, through our just living of life that it's been unparalleled. He's the guy who's like, you let other men fuck your woman, but what's interesting, and I later on, he totally comes around and says, "Wow, you're a far stronger man than I am." He's a brilliant guy, amazing. And I always knew that, and it was a moment of failing for him for sure. And he recognized that. Time and vulnerability. And the vulnerability in the book that's where I found my authenticity in writing this book, was being that vulnerable. And in all fairness, I owe a lot of that to my editor, who is one of my first grade pals. He's one of the guys that I've been friends with. He's a brilliant editor. And he always called me out when he would read a chapter. He'd go, "Nah, this is bullshit. You're hiding. Let it out, man. Come on. I know you. This is bullshit." And he would just say, "This is crap. Rewrite it." It was awesome. Actually, it was someone who knows you so well as your editor was absolutely brilliant.
You used the word brilliant about 3 or 4 times in that section. And I seem to recall you mentioning that you thought you were not very bright because all of your friends were so much more brilliant than you were.
Oh, so you read the end of the book.
I read bits and pieces throughout.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to talk about New York City and your upbringing. And a question that I have that formulated as we were talking, and that is that with your parents being artistic and cultural and educated and urban, do you think that gave you a head start in being more emotionally connected than, say, a guy who grew up in rural Montana, to farmer parents or something like that? Because I think of my early days in New York City, which was around the same time, which was in the 80s. I moved to New York right after college. So I got to New York in 86, 87. And I remember how exciting and dangerous and vibrant New York was then. And I remember who was it? It was like, Camille Paglia or somebody like that, who said, why are they trying to make New York not dangerous? Why is Giuliani trying to make New York not dangerous? New York should be dangerous. New York should be a little scary. 42nd Street should be kind of sleazy. It shouldn't be a family playground. And so that's the New York that I remember, and that gets me geared up. And so to go back to that question is, did growing up in that environment help you to be sort of a more connected guy than maybe you would have otherwise?
I can't speak for whether or not that. I can't speak for the guy who grew up in rural Montana because I have no reference point for that. So I don't know how much nature nurture was involved in me. If my parents had been my parents in rural Montana, would I be any different?
Yeah.
I don't know. I do know that the environment of New York City exposed me to an unbelievable array of experiences that you can only get in New York City, and especially in the '80s when New York City was rough and tumble. I mean, there was just that show on HBO, and I don't really watch shows, but I watched the show The Deuce. I don't know, which takes place in New York City in the 70s and 80s.
In the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, but it actually finishes in the 80s. And seeing the New York City of that time like brought me back there. It was wild, and there was this edginess, and there was this wildness, and there was this creativity that existed, and there was wildness on the streets. And every day I went out in the street, there was a little bit of, how am I going to keep myself safe today? So I think a mixture of all that probably worked into who I was. My mom's sister was a very famous opera singer, actually, and so I was cultured there, even though I was a kid who just wanted to go climb trees and race around Central Park. I consider myself lucky to have grown up in New York City. But I know friends who consider themselves lucky to have grown up on a farm in Iowa. Right. So I don't know if I'm giving you a good answer to your question.
No, this is a great answer. Yeah.
I do know that when I got to college, and I went to a rural New England college, when I got there, I did notice that I felt like I had lived more than the kids who came from more rural. And I mean, unfortunately, if you're not exposed to different cultures, you tend to be afraid of them. And I remember walking down a street with a friend, someone I'd just met recently right after I got to college. We were walking down the street, and there were 3 black men walking towards us on the street. And they just looked like regular guys. But the kid I was walking with wanted to cross the street. And I was like, what? I'm like, no, they're fine. What? But that was a real eye-opening moment for me, because I really understood how much the experiences we have, and the experiences that I had, really helped shape how you outwardly see the world. And especially in our political climate right now, it's about the fact that, and people you really disagree with, it's because they just haven't seen things you've seen in a lot of ways, and on both sides. Probably a very long-winded answer to your question, but I do feel that growing up in New York City allowed me to interact with ideas and people that I probably couldn't have interacted with in that wide array in any other place. Yeah.
No, that's a great summation. And I'm glad that wasn't your entire answer, because there was a lot of great stuff inside that. I know you feel like that was an overly long answer, and it really wasn't, because there was a lot of great stuff in there. And, in full disclosure, maybe part of the reason I asked that question is that there is a piece of me that is borderline envious, that, I always wished I had grown up in the city. In a city, but specifically New York, because after I got to New York, I meshed with it so well. I lived there for 32 years before my husband and I decided to get the hell out and move up to the mountains. Because it stopped being, it's funny. In my 20s, it was an adventure. In my 30s, it was functional, I guess, or essential. In my 40s, it was just my life. And then in my 50s, it started to get on my nerves, and I needed to get out.
That's really
But it was funny. In my 20s, 30s, and 40s, if you had said, someday you're going to live somewhere other than New York City, I would have said, nah, never. I will never leave New York. I will never not live in New York. And so when we made the decision to not live in New York, I was kind of shocked, but it was definitely, it felt like the right decision.
Wow. Yeah. I can't live anywhere else. I'm too addicted to meeting new people and seeing new art and music. And I'm a partial owner in a music venue, and I just love that. And theater, live theater, all the off-Broadway here, to me, Broadway's kind of dead, but all the off-Broadway, there's so much great. People are writing great things and doing great things, and you can pay $10 and go see a great theater performance in a 30-seat theater. And where else? I do know a lot of people leave, and I keep trying to leave. And I keep coming back. I travel a lot.
No. You don't have to leave. And look, there is a small piece of me that every now and then still wishes I lived there, because I miss the constant stimulation. I miss the access to absolutely anything and everything that you want at every hour of the day or night. If I want to go and, roll around on a jiu-jitsu mat at 2 a.m., I know there's a place where I can do that. Right?
Yeah.
And so I do miss that. And honestly, we were big theater nerds and theater investors. We have money in a few shows that still pay us, which is nice. But we did a count once and figured out during the period of our lives that we were together, that we were a couple, how many shows we had seen together. And doing the math, we had seen 3,500 shows together.
That's amazing.
because we would go to the theater 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
Times every week, times 25 years, That
is a theater junkie. That is,
yeah, we were theater junkies. And we have friends who actually see more than even we did, because we restricted ourselves to, Broadway, off-Broadway, off-Broadway. But we have friends who do that plus BAM and the opera and performance art and, cabaret and all of that stuff. So even we get put to shame by a few friends of ours. But yeah, so I get it. I get the need for that kind of cultural stimulation. And honestly, I do feel the lack of that where I live now, which is part of the reason that the Zoom explosion is so important to me, because it keeps me connected to interesting people like you, who I wouldn't ordinarily meet. And honestly, even if I was still in the city, I don't know that our paths would have crossed. I think we travel in different circles.
Maybe. And obviously, except if we might run into each other at the theater.
That's true. We might run into each other at the theater. And yet, it's funny, as I read the pieces of the book that I read, and as I've been sort of sitting here and talking with you, I've been like, Adam and I should be friends. Adam and I should have been friends. We would have been great friends. He would have pushed my limits and made me do some things that scare the shit out of me.
In all fairness, I mentioned something like that in the book. About my best friends, we just chat. We're always pushing each other's buttons. We're always challenging each other to go farther. Right. That's what I expect in my friends, to push my buttons, to push me. So yeah. And but back to the theater. Do you remember a show called Then She Fell? It was an immersive theater performance out in Brooklyn in an old insane asylum. I don't know if that's the right PC.
I do remember the show. It was by the same people who did Tamara and all of that, right?
It might have been. I don't know. It was a while ago. Anyway, there's a scene I hope you do read the book, but there's a whole scene from Then She Fell in the book that maybe now you may have a certain more appreciation for, now that I know your love of theater.
Yeah, absolutely. And we still we still go to the city 3 or 4 times a year and pack in, 4 shows in a weekend or whatever. We do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday kind of weekend. So there are two questions that we ask every guest who appears on the show. And since you are in the hot seat, it is now your turn.
All right. I wish I'd prepared for this.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, by writing this book, you did, because you bring it up an awful lot. What does the word authenticity mean to you?
Oh, did you answer already?
That's
Don't
the
wait for
question. Answer the first question first.
Actually, no. That's I can do that one.
I knew you could, because I read parts of the book.
To me, authenticity is being honest to myself about my motivations for what I'm doing. That's authenticity. That if what I'm presenting is what's going on inside, that's authenticity. At the base root, I think that's how I would define it. If I can look back on my actions or my interactions and know, I was being true to myself in that particular moment, that's authentic. I think the simplest answer is just that that I really understand that my motivations are true, that I'm not, and that I'm not lying to myself.
Yeah. Cool. That's beautiful. That's a great answer. The second question, which is your chance to freestyle, is, what is the one question you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask you?
Wow. You asked some really good questions.
And there's another way to look at this.
Yeah.
And that is, what is it that you would want people to know that we didn't uncover during this chat? They're kind of two sides of the same coin.
Right. Oh, man. Wow, I'm having a really tough time with this question. I'm failing.
You're not failing.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I kind of wish, if you had read the book, you might have asked me about chapter 9.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 9 is titled Fight Club. And that is sort of the pivot point in my life, where Jane's best friend gets diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer and is given 6 months to live. And without giving out the details, I am presented with a choice there I'm presented with some events that are happening that absolutely uncovered some of the deepest, darkest things in my soul. And the journey I go through in that chapter, where I had previously thought I had solved this problem, I saw into me pieces that I never knew were there. And I guess the question I wish you'd asked me is like, what was that like to all of a sudden see the monster that was lurking in your head that you never knew was there, that had been controlling you your whole life? And I mean, I'm sort of tearing up as I'm describing it, because it was one of the most emotional things I ever went through. And had I not said yes to Jane and yes to this journey, I shudder at the fact that I may never have learned these things about myself. So that moment in my life and that moment in the book was sort of the whole point about running towards the burning building. Jane presented me with a choice. Do you want to date me? You're going to have to date me like this. And I didn't want it. I said, no, can't we date the way I want to date? She's like, nope, this is how I date, period. Non-negotiable. And if I had let fear get the better of me, I never would have gone through this journey. I never would have had these incredible experiences. And I never would have had that moment with Jane and her friend that caused probably the greatest growth in my own self that I've ever had. So, yeah, you gotta lean into the fear sometimes, and you gotta lean into the discomfort. Because if you don't, you may miss out on living the best life you can possibly live.
Wow. What an amazing note to end this on. I'm literally getting chills at the moment, which is how I know when I get the chills, I know I've just experienced something real. So that's awesome. Gosh, I feel like we could go on for another 3 hours because the conversation's just been so easy and sweet. And I wish people could have seen you just then wiping the tears away from your eyes. That was beautiful. Like literally, I'm falling apart here. If people want to connect with you, get in touch, read the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I created a website for the book. It's called Seek the Risk, and it's .net, not .com, .net, seektherisk.net. And a little bio there. There's links to the audiobook and paperback on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. You can also send me an email at adam@seektherisk.net. I got to tell you, getting emails from readers is, I get emails in equal numbers from women and men who just say thank you, right? It's like, oh, it was just so wonderful to know I'm not alone in having these emotions and having these thoughts and these conflicts. So I love getting emails from people. But yeah, that's the best way to reach me. And, hopefully I am trying to sell books. So
yeah, absolutely.
I would love it if people would buy. If you're a Spotify subscriber, it's free on Spotify, actually. If you like audiobooks,
okay,
that's another way. But the seektherisk.net, and there's also a link to my blog. I've started a writing blog because a lot of people said keep writing, and so I'm sort of keeping my muscle going. It's funny, we talked about friendship. I think the next book I'm going to write might be about friendship. It's the most important thing to me in the world. And yeah, so.
Wow. About the writing. So I know you referred to yourself as a failed writer in that passage that I read. But you are the opposite of a failed writer because you made me feel when I read your work. And I actually read a couple of your blog posts as well. And, that is not the work of a failed writer. That is the work of a natural writer. You really do have a gift. And,
Wow,
I'm glad that you're flexing that muscle for the rest of us. I'm glad for the rest of us that you're flexing that muscle, as well as for you, for what it's helping you discover in yourself. So, any last words, anything that you need to get off your chest before we close up here, Adam?
No, this has been great. I really appreciated the conversation. Actually, this was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed meeting you. And I hope we will continue to stay in contact because I think we might be friends.
I think we might be friends. I think this might be a love connection.
Could be.
So with that, I'm going to say thank you. I am so grateful for you taking the time out of your schedule and being here with me today. I know that, you're promoting a book, but I'm also asking you to give me content for free. So it's a trade. It's a trade-off.
It's an arrangement. We have an arrangement.
But again, you really do have my sincerest gratitude for being here. Thank you so much. And with that, it is time to throw the bags back into the jalopy and head back out onto the authenticity road. So on behalf of the show, I am Ator, and until we meet again, please be authentic. Goodbye, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope what you've heard will help you on the road to your personal authenticity.
Visit us at www.authenticityroad.online.